tonight on Climb Talk, the radio show, and Radio 1190, we're talking with Fort Collins resident Regina Stump. Regina recently took a fall on El Diente down in San Miguel Mountains down in southwest Colorado. El Diente is a serious endeavor. So, Regina, thank you for joining us on Climb Talk, and tell us about it.
Yeah, so that day I was looking forward to that weekend so much. So let's see, me and my climbing partner, we had arranged to meet at the Navajo Lake Trailhead late on Friday night, and we were going to car camp, and then we were going to start the day super early Saturday morning.
What day would this be?
This was, oh my gosh, it feels like forever ago, but the Saturday would have been the 5th, September 5th.
Okay.
So, Regina, I gotta ask you, why did you guys pick El Diente? That's dangerous. You're just starting out in your mountaineering experiences. Why El Diente?
Well, up until this point, I've done some winter 14ers since moving here, and I love the winter ones, and I didn't realize that, honestly, they were more difficult and that people don't do them. So I looked into doing some things that are a little bit, we'll say, off the beaten path, and I like doing things that are difficult and mentally and physically taxing and testing. I kind of do it as a hobby because as an athlete, I'm an ultramarathoner and trail athlete as well. So I kind of stumbled upon the climbing community on Facebook with a group called 14ers.com. And I found some climbing partners who were about the same ability level as me, and we just complement each other well. And I started catching wind of what has been known as the 4 great Colorado traverses. And they tend to be some really sketchy ridge lines with some class 4, class 5 climbing without the need of ropes or the ability to do trad climbing. So that's my favorite thing. I love to boulder and kind of use my own body to get myself from point A to point B. So I've done the Little Bear to Blanca traverse. I've done the Crestone traverse. And one of the other traverses that was on the list to do was the El Diente to Mount Wilson traverse. And I had done some research on it, got some data on it, and I did a very, very detailed navigational route that I had put into my phone, my GPS, and I started with my climbing partner who hasn't done that one either, and we were ready to go. We were stoked. So on Saturday, the plan was to start at the Navajo Lake Trailhead, hike into Navajo Lake, and then go up to El Diente using a route called the North Butchus route, which is essentially an up-only route. You don't come down this route because it's pretty steep and it's kind of harrowing to go down. You only want to go up it. So we were climbing up it, and we hit probably about 13,000 feet around sunrise, and it was absolutely gorgeous. We were having a ball. And we're almost, we're getting toward the summit, and at the summit then, we want to begin, the traverse part, the actual, crux of this adventure. So we're having a great time. And to get to the summit, there's about a 20-foot vertical pitch that we have to kind of ascend to get to the summit. And I take the lead, and I'm climbing up, and I get to this boulder, and it's perfect. It's a really nice boulder. I'm actually sitting on it. And the next 10 feet above me to climb is a really sketchy, the rock juts out above me. And I'm looking at it and assessing it, and I'm like, oh, I don't like this. It's too risky. So I was going to just go back down the 10 feet that I had ascended, and we were going to go up a different pitch. And it was in that moment of down climbing when I had both my hands hanging on to the very boulder that I had been sitting on. And essentially imagine yourself doing a pull-up. I was hanging onto this boulder, and it released from the mountain.
Wow. That's scary.
I hadn't expected it because I was sitting on this rock, tested it, it was solid, it was fine. And then all of a sudden I was dropping that 10 feet and then tumbling down 50.
My goodness.
So, Regina, what went through your mind when you're tumbling down that towering 14,000-foot peak in Colorado?
I'm going to be as honest as I possibly can. When I was tumbling, I remember having two different sensations. From a physical standpoint, my body was telling me, stop, get your feet under you, stop. But in my mind, I literally thought, oh, this is how people die. It's going to go black really soon.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And I was just waiting for it all to end, like just like that.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. And you broke your wrist and you hit your face a little bit. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. The only visible things that were messed up at that point, when I did stop, I noticed blood kind of dripping on the rocks around me. I was like, okay, all right. And I touched my eye and I had a glove on, and thankfully, like, the blood stopped pretty quick for being a face injury. It dripped a little bit, and then it stopped, and I was like, okay, that's great. And then after a brief self-assessment of legs, vertebrae, neck, and my head, I looked at my left hand, and I was like, oh, wait, that doesn't look right.
Oh. And you were alone at this point, but your friends came and found you?
No. So I was climbing with my climbing partner that I mentioned before, and he was still up at that pitch that I had started climbing, and he saw me kind of take the fall down. So he was still like 50 feet up. Yeah. And I called up to him. As soon as I saw my wrist, as weird as it was, the only words I could utter were, "I'm broke."
I'm broke.
So he came down to me and just kind of talked me through like what the situation was. And honestly, if it weren't for him, like, I don't know how that day would have played out, because he was super even keeled. He kept his cool, just tossed out different options of courses of action, and he was great. And also, if it weren't for his ibuprofen, I would have been in a lot more pain too.
Yeah, he had two with him.
Yes, he did.
So then you had to go 7 miles back out, right, from there?
That's correct.
What was that like?
So Regina, what is it like hiking down off of 14er after you took a terrible fall with a badly broken wrist?
Well, I can say that there are more adventures that I would have rather have done, but climbing down in that condition was mentally taxing, but I think because it was so mentally taxing that it may have saved my life, because like I could have focused on the pain in my wrist, and I do believe that I fractured my tailbone and some ribs as well, but I had to think, okay, what's greater than this pain? Something I need to focus on greater right now is every single step to get myself off of this particular spot down to safety. And having to focus so hard on every single step going down, because it was steep, scrambly, rocky, and having one less limb to rely upon going down, I had to dial in. And I think that just having to mentally focus on that really was imperative to getting out of there, quote unquote, safely.
That's an interesting story, Regina. So, audience, tonight on Climb Talk, the radio show, we're talking with Fort Collins resident Regina Stump. Recently was September 5th. Regina, along with her climbing partner, was climbing the 14er El Diente down in southwest Colorado, and near the summit, Regina took a fall. She fell about 60 feet, keeping her cool and staying super focused, along with the help of her climbing partner. She and her climbing partner hiked and descended 7 miles to safety. That's an incredible story.
Yeah, it really is. So how are you feeling today? Are you still all in pain and stuff?
Honestly, the thing that's probably the most limiting is my tailbone and especially my like upper left hip. I know that I definitely hit a ton of rocks in my fall, and I'm thankful that I can be standing on both legs and I'm not paralyzed. But I do believe that I have a tailbone fracture because I can barely bodyweight squat without kind of groaning and getting a little uncomfortable. But with time, I think it'll be okay.
What were those moments like right after your fall? Like, where were you? What were your surroundings like? And how did you get out of that immediate predicament?
That's a good question.
That's a great question. So when I realized that I had stopped, I was on, like, I just kind of stopped on a rock. And it wasn't any specific rock. It wasn't necessarily flat. And it wasn't at any special location. And I mean that in the sense that there was nothing special about where I stopped in the sense that I should not have. The grade was consistent. Down, sharp, like a descent, which it's kind of like imagining there's a downslope of ice. If you're sliding down a downslope of ice, there's nothing to stop you until you reach the bottom. And directly beneath me, like as I'm looking down, there was actually a very steep drop off into a gully. And there was a wall, a literal wall of angels stopping me from like just plummeting down into that gully because the grade was consistently the same. The rocks were sharp. There was nothing special about how I stopped. So once I realized that I was there and I had stopped, like the first thing, of course, was, physical self-assessment. And then it was still super early in the day. So knowing that, and once my climbing partner came down to me and he was like, hey, like I have cell service, we can call SIR and they'll have a team come up to us, because there was no way that any sort of helicopter could land in that environment. And we thought about it. I'm like, okay, so to organize a team from, at this point, Telluride, to get that team to...
Okay, we're back to recording. Everything's a go. So you were telling me about, there you were considering your rescue options, and if I could get a helicopter there, et cetera.
Yes. So we thought about logistically what it would take to get a team from Telluride to the trailhead and then get them all the way up to us, with rescue supplies and a stretcher.
Yeah.
And that was going to take hours.
It's going to take half a day.
Yeah. And it was still, at this point, like the accident happened around 8 a.m. And I'm like, we've got time to get down to the trailhead. I've got two legs that, they work. They're in pain, but they work. And we're going to get down off this mountain in probably the same amount of time as it's going to take to get a team up here. Plus, honestly, there are people that have much, much more serious injuries than me who could need that team and not me. Yeah. All I've got is a banged up wrist. So I thought about that, and I'm like, yeah, let's save that manpower for someone who actually needs, like, a life saved. Okay. So that was kind of when we decided, down we go. So super slow, super steady, but we made it back down.
Did you traverse out? Like, from where you were, how did you reach your team?
So, I mean, essentially, it was just a pretty sketchy, rocky climb down to the actual trail. Once we got to the trail, it was a nice hike back to the trailhead. Okay.
So, audience, tonight at Climb Talk, we're talking with Fort Collins resident Regina Stump. Regina recently took a basketball on a 14er here in southwest Colorado on El Diente. El Diente is a serious endeavor for pretty much any mountaineer, I would say. And so Regina and her partner, after the fall, they climbed down 7 miles to the trailhead, and you got yourself to the hospital. You got your medical treatments. And doing a little bit of research on you, Regina, you said that this was a life-changing event. But how has this changed your outlook on life?
Oh, man, that's a powerful question. So the first thing is, like, I can't emphasize enough I can't put a quantity on how grateful I truly am, because first thing, like, I should not even have breath in my lungs right now. Second thing is I have a body that can function, and I have a brain that can still think and remember, and heck, I can stand on one leg and keep my balance. Like, the amount of impact that my body hit and my brain hit, like, I should not have half the level of function that I'm able to stand here with today. Yeah. So coming back to, like, gratitude is something I'm reminded every day. And I had actually a great conversation with my dad yesterday. My dad called me. All my family is in Pennsylvania, and my dad called and just checking up on me. And I said, Dad, like, my tailbone really, really hurts. He said, Reg, do you know what that means? I said, no. Like, what? He's like, it means you can feel your tailbone. How cool is that? And I was like, you know what? Shoot, that's so right. I'm so grateful that I can have pain in my tailbone because I can still feel it. And
because you can still feel. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah. And it's going to take a little bit of time, and I'm going to be displaced a little bit from my normal and from work and from my usual endeavors of athletic stuff, but that's okay. I'd much rather be temporarily displaced and still have the ability to impact lives around me than to be dead.
Yeah. Well, we're glad you're here.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. Regina, thank you for sharing your story of your adventure on El Diente and how it affected your life and how it reminded us all of how we should be grateful for just being here today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to, if I can offer anything too from my experience, is that like, no matter what frame of life you're in, I feel like we're all being challenged and we're all going through adversities, and it might be hard to determine what our purpose or our meaning is despite those adversities. But I encourage to anybody that everyone has a purpose and everyone has a meaning, because there is no one other than you who can do what you are.
Yeah.
Everyone
Regina,
here is, yeah.
Regina, did you have that insight before this, or did it come about because of this?
I would say I had it before this, but it's been greatly intensified because of it.
Okay.
Well, I like it. Thank you, Regina. Thank you for joining us on CLIMBTALK on Radio 1190.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Regina.
Bye.
Bye.
I know. Next, we're going to be talking about Denver student and Shelterbox volunteer, Brittany Woodrum. Brittany has made it her mission to climb all 58 of Colorado's 14er peaks to raise awareness and funding for families around the world who have lost their homes and are now facing the threat of COVID-19. I even hate to say that word. Yeah. The Shelterbox is an international relief organization committed to delivering relief items like tents, water filters, and solar lights to people in the Philippines, Syria, and even the U.S. during difficult times, especially hurricane season.
I'm going to go ahead and bring her in then. Brittany?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you for joining us. We're going to talk about your volunteerism and Shelterbox. Now, I don't know anything about Shelterbox, but honestly, you're not selling anything. You're only giving, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, cool. So I'm totally in them. So I'll talk about Shelterbox.
Yeah, so Shelterbox is a disaster relief organization. So essentially, whenever an individual or community loses everything as a result of natural disaster or conflict or war, they're one of those organizations that goes in and provides all the basics. So while they are a shelter organization, they provide much more than shelter. So this includes things like water filtration kits, blankets, mosquito nets, cooking equipment, all the basics that an individual or community would need to kind of get by until more aid and help comes along.
That sounds great. Who started Shelterbox?
Yeah, so it was actually founded by a Rotary Club in England, just as a small club project about 2 decades ago. We're actually celebrating our 20th anniversary this year.
Oh, that's excellent. Now, I understand, Brittany, that you have a project, a 14ers project, that you started in July. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so one of the unique things about Shelterbox is that it's primarily run and funded by volunteers, and it still has a very strong relationship with Rotary and Rotarians around the world. And so I became an ambassador about a year ago for Shelterbox, and as an ambassador, what I do is I kind of go around and just share Shelterbox's mission and show people what some of the aid looks like. And whenever I joined the team, I quickly learned that some of the other ambassadors have a reputation for taking on different physical challenges with the box as just a creative and fun way of bringing awareness to disaster relief and this need around the world and sharing Shelterbox's mission. So whenever I joined the team, I was like, oh, this is amazing. And it's not so much a question of if I'll do a physical challenge one day, but, when and what will it be? And so,
when and what will it be?
Yeah, exactly. So whenever I moved to Denver last year to actually start my master's in humanitarian assistance, eventually I'd like to be one of the people who's actually deployed to disaster situations or like helping with that post-disaster relief. Was one of the reasons I also wanted to come to Denver and to Colorado was because I was already very outdoorsy and considered myself an avid outdoors woman. And I grew up out east in Kentucky in the Appalachian Mountains, and as much as I love those mountains, it's hard to call yourself an outdoors person if you've never been out west. So I definitely wanted to come out and explore these mountains a bit more. Mm-hmm. And so whenever COVID-19 first happened back in March, whenever we were being told to kind of shelter in place, being very tapped into the humanitarian assistance world, just because we're in the midst of a pandemic does not mean that disasters have just magically stopped. We just don't hear about them anymore, and we're not talking about them. And if we do hear about them, they just show up as blips on our radar. And so I kind of felt helpless, like sitting at home in my tiny little apartment, seeing this growing need, and being a very service-oriented individual, I get a lot of my own purpose and fulfillment in life from being able to give and being able to provide for my community and the causes I care about. But I thought there's got to be something that I can do to go out and make a big positive impact while making as little of a negative impact as possible. And so, I was kind of sitting in my Denver apartment looking out at the mountains, and I thought, it seems kind of fitting that I should go out and find some physical mountains to climb as we as a global community are coming together to overcome and summit this very abstract and metaphorical mountain that is COVID-19.
And it started in July, ends this month. How has the project gone along so far? Any highlights, any challenging times?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it started off, it's been an incredible project overall, like life-changing. Every day I say I feel like I'm getting more out of this project than I'm giving, which most people would argue, probably isn't true. But I'm having the time of my life out here. There's nothing I would rather be doing. And the project has taken on so many developments that I never foresaw. So in terms of just the physical progress, I'm currently at 51 out of 58 of the mountains. So I only have 7 mountains.
That's incredible, Brittany.
Yeah,
I
only have seven mountains to go. I should be done in like less than a week if all goes well. However, I'm kind of
kidding me. So Brittany, have you done El Diente yet?
Funny you should mention it. That's going to be Thursday. El Diente and Mount Wilson on Thursday. Yeah.
Wow. Well,
that's incredible.
Have you done El Diente? How do you know about El Diente? Why that one?
We just had a guest who was on El Diente September 5th.
Oh, really?
Yep. We just wrapped up a piece with, you tell the story, Chris.
Okay, so we were talking to Regina Stump, and she fell, actually. She was at a section, she was at a loose rock over an exposed area.
Yeah.
On top of the rock, retreated, was holding on to that rock. It came loose. She fell 40 feet, and then she tumbled an additional 50 feet. But she broke her wrist, was able to walk out of there. Some scrapes and bruises, maybe some other breaks, but she's out and around and alert and happy to be alive.
Yeah, that traverse, like just this season alone, I have heard so many stories about crumbly rocks, and I'm quite nervous because we've just had a big snow, and after a big snow and then a big melt, you have like the rock is loose and it's totally new terrain essentially, and so I'm doing that traverse with a buddy on Thursday, and I'm just already thinking like, got to be extra careful because one of my biggest fears right now coming to the finish line is like I'm going to make some stupid mistake and knock up or something and not be able to finish. But in terms of like what's been a highlight or what's been the greatest challenge, all 14ers are challenging. Some of them are a little bit more technical or perhaps longer hikes or include more elevation gain. But I think from the get-go, on my second day, I did one of the most technical mountains. And for me, so much comes back to the community and the people I'm with. I'm a very people-driven person. I think that's what makes me, so drawn to humanitarian assistance to begin with. I just remember that day I was not out there with a very supportive partner, and there's like this sheer rock face that you have to climb, and it was my second day, and I was terrified. Did
you have a rope on?
I didn't even have a rope on, nope. I don't know if you know anything about Little Bear, but it truly is. It's almost like Class 5, like scaling a wall with this giant box on my back, which basically, it's not heavy, but it acts like a giant sail, so if there was even a breeze, I could have been off the mountain. And so that definitely made me ask some questions, and it made me kind of reckon with some things. Like, if I don't feel comfortable, I need to be able to say, like, okay, I'm going to turn around. And no one would have, faulted me for that. Everyone is like safety first, right? But
so
also,
you made a great point. Let's talk about that point, because I think it's really important. In other words, so Brittany's point was, if she's not feeling it, if she doesn't want to take the risk, if she doesn't want to face the danger of what the mountain is presenting to her at that particular moment, she has to have the ability and be able to say, no, I'm turning around now, and that's just how it is.
Yeah, and, I don't think any of my sponsors or any of my supporters who are, following me, be it physically or virtually, it's like nobody wants me to put myself in risk. That's not the point of this project, right? And I'm really happy, though, to say after that mountain, because I did that one so early, it really set the bar high in terms of understanding what I was capable of, because I did make it to the top of that mountain, and I made it down safely.
And you got off it as well.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And it really set a very solid value system, I think, and perspective going into the project. And
that's cool.
It's really allowed for me to, feel so much stronger and more confident in all these other situations. And one of the cool developments about the project, you're talking about highlights, I think has been just the community that has rallied behind the project. So out of the 51 that I've climbed to this day, I think I've only had to do 3 or 4 alone. And that's because so many people, strangers even, have reached out to me saying like, oh, I really want to come and climb. Or, different people from different chapters of my life have kind of come together. And I've had some real motley crews out there sometimes, and people who didn't even know each other who have just rallied behind this mission and this project, and I've had some of the best conversations and created some of the best friendships from this project. And one of the cool things is just getting people out on the mountain and out on these 14ers who never would have thought that they could or never would have done so otherwise. And I've heard a lot of people say who are following me, like, physically on a trail sometimes, that they've been nervous to maybe do a climb or about one section of a hike, and they're like, if that girl can do it in a box, I can do it too. And so that's always really encouraging and cool to hear.
So, Brittany, you carry that big box on your back on all these peaks, don't you?
Yeah.
Wow. So Brittany, I have to ask, why are you carrying that box on your back on these peaks?
Well, I mean, essentially it's all about raising awareness. It's a creative fundraiser. And Shelterbox, it's got this iconic aid box. I mean, it started really because these Rotarians had this idea, like, why can't we just fit all of this aid in one box? I mean, the word box is in the name of the organization, so it's very central to its identity. And this box is their logo, it's very iconic. And so it's very central, I think, to the mission and to the idea of being able to provide the aid that they do. And so, just carrying the box is like this iconic image for disaster relief. And it's really cool because I've been able to share Shelterbox's mission both on and off the mountain. So where a lot of the fundraising happens is actually off the mountain, giving like virtual presentations and stuff. But just having this giant box on my back everyone wants to stop and talk to me, and the hiking community is very open and encouraging. And so I've had a lot of wonderful conversations just on the side of a mountain about disaster relief, particularly in times of COVID.
Sounds like people can see you, for sure.
Wow. That's an interesting story. So, audience, tonight on Climb Talk, the radio show on Radio 1190, we've been talking with Denver student and Shelterbox volunteer Brittany Woodrum. Brittany has really been paying her dues, giving back to people who've been suffering through the nastiness of COVID. And with the help of Shelterbox, which is an international relief organization committed to delivering relief items like tents, water filters, and solar lights around the world, even to people in the U.S. Brittany, I just really can't say enough. Just thank you so much for your work.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. And thanks so much for having me and taking the time. This is a joy.
Cool.
Okay, well, I just want to say thank you again for everyone. Okay, we're out of time. All right.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Brittany.
Thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. So
Okay, it's 6 p.m. in Boulder, Colorado, and you're listening to the Climb Talk radio show on Radio 1190 AM, and now 98.9 FM here in Boulder. Tonight on Climb Talk, the radio show, we're going to be talking with legendary climber, author Chris Van Leuven. Chris is calling in from California. Chris, what's going on, and who do we have on the show tonight?
We have Ken Yager and Allyson Gunsallas of the Yosemite Climbing Association, and we are talking about the upcoming Yosemite Facelift, and it's the ACT Local event coming up on September 22 to 27. Allyson is a member of the board, and Ken is the founder. And so, Ken, why is this an important event, and how can people get involved?
Well, I think it's really important now. Normally we do it in Yosemite every year, and this year because of COVID, we're asking people to stay at home, and it's a chance to put that same energy into an area that's close to home and dear to them. And I think it gives somebody or everybody a chance to do something positive after all this kind of pessimistic outlook on due to the COVID.
Ken, thank you so much for your work and making a difference in Yosemite and other places. So if people want to get involved, because most people are stuck at home, what can people do? Since the Yosemite Facelift is going to be virtual now, most people are not going to have the opportunity to come into the valley. What can people do to get involved?
Well, we have a new website, www.yosemiteFacelift.com. And if you go on that website, at the top there's a button that says Toolkit 2020, and it should have all the information on there, including our pledge, which is our registration form. We are asking people to register no matter where you are in the world, clean up where you're at, and by signing up for the pledge, it also enters them into our giveaways.
I'm going to jump in here. Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, Yosemite Facelift is an annual event where climbers and park service rangers and industry sponsors have come together to pick up litter in Yosemite National Park. And because we can't all be together physically in the park this year, we're asking people to pick up litter around home, close to places they love, that maybe have served them well, over the last several months where we've all kind of been a little more limited in how much we've been able to travel.
That's a good idea.
This is the 17th year, and you guys have now organized the cleanup of more than 1 million pounds of trash in Yosemite. So this is a pretty big event, biggest event of the year in Yosemite, really.
That is
Did
correct.
you guys actually pull 1 million pounds of trash out of Yosemite?
We have over the last 17 years.
Wow, that's scary.
It has gone way down since we started doing this. The average now is about 13,000 to 16,000 pounds a year. That's micro trash. That's how much gets dropped every year when we have full visitation. This year is a little different because it's been closed, and there's been people up there cleaning all year long because we have nothing else to do. So Yosemite's pretty clean. So we're asking people to clean other areas that need that help.
Cool. So, audience, tonight on Climb Talk, the radio show on Radio 1190, we're talking with Ken Yager. He is the founder of the Yosemite Facelift. But this year, it is the virtual Yosemite Facelift, and it runs from September 22 to September 27. And again, Ken, thank you so much for your work starting this wonderful foundation. And also, you're the founder of the Yosemite Climbing Association. That's cool, dude. What was your motivation?
My motivation was to save or protect and collect Yosemite climbing history, make it available for public interpretation, and to build a permanent climbing museum exhibit in Yosemite National Park.
I like that. That's incredibly cool. How can I and everyone else contribute to your amazing museum, Ken?
We have a PayPal button on our Yosemite Climbing Association website. They can also mail a check, and we get to keep all of that money to P.O. Box 89 in Yosemite, California, 95389.
Don't you also have prints available, Ken, and some of the most iconic shots from Yosemite climbing?
Yes, we do have certain historic climbing shots that are available. People can order prints. We're just in the process of setting that up, so it's not on our website now. If somebody wants, they can email us and get more information or give us a call at 209-742-1000.
What's that number again?
209-742-1000.
So, audience, tonight on Climb Talk, the radio show, we're opening the hour with legendary first ascensionist and the founder of the Yosemite Climbing Association, Ken Yager. Ken has been responsible for the annual Yosemite Facelift, which has been running for 17 years, really, Ken. And you don't get paid anything for this, do you?
I do not, and neither does Allison, and we should mention Allison's name because I couldn't do it without her.
I was just about to say, Mike, we've got legendary Chris Van Leuven and Allison Gunsallas on the line as well.
Thanks, Allison.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm super stoked about Facelift Act Local this year. So we're trying to take that spirit of cleaning up in Yosemite, which is one that Ken really was foundational in creating. You know, he came up with this event, Yosemite Facelift, 17 years ago. He brought all the climbers together, and we started working with climbing rangers to clean up the park together, which was so important for our community. You know, we really developed a partnership with the land managers there. And so we want to take that spirit from that wonderful event that Ken started this year. We want to ask people to act local. So we're calling the event Facelift Act Local. And really the idea is to take that power of the national parks, you know, places that we love all over the country, and to apply it to like our local park or even our street. You know, places where we've been sheltering in place this year. You know, it's been a rough year. My feeling is if one person gets outside and picks up litter around home who wouldn't have because of this event, because they feel motivated to get outside September 22nd through the 27th, take our pledge, YosemiteFacelift.com, get outside, clean up. If only one person who wouldn't have gets outside to do that, this event will be a success in my mind.
The event will be a success if only just one person makes a difference and cleans something up. It could be your house, it could be your backyard, it could be the bathroom, which I don't want to clean. And
totally.
And Allison, you can get involved by posting your photos on social media and using a hashtag. How does that work?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me, Chris. So we are trying to promote the event through giveaways and also evening programs. If you want to be registered for the giveaways, you have to take our pledge, and you can see that pledge on YosemiteFacelift.com. And then you also have to post a photo on Instagram with the hashtag FaceliftsActLocal. And what we'll be doing is we'll be cross-referencing the photos with the pledges, and we have giveaways from our wonderful sponsors, Subaru, who's actually the official vehicle of Facelift Act Local. North Face is a co-host of the event this year. They've really helped us with sponsorship funding. And then we also have giveaways from Black Diamond and a couple of other really well-known industry sponsors. Our evening programs will be hosted on our YouTube channel. It's the Yosemite Facelift YouTube channel. One of the coolest parts of the physical event are the evening programs we put together. Ken is so good at being connected with people in the industry, and he has a really keen eye for picking good presenters. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to take that same high-quality evening program and make it available to our participants virtually on our YouTube channel this year.
Boy, that sounds interesting. Yeah. So, audience, again, tonight on Climb Talk, the radio show on Radio 1190, we're talking with First Ascensionist and the founder of the Yosemite Climbing Association, and his associate, Ken Yager. Ken started the Yosemite Facelift. It's been running 17 years, but this year they're doing the virtual Yosemite Facelift. And they want people to act local and clean up your local crag, clean up your local neighborhood, clean up your street, even clean your bathroom if you feel like it.
Don't forget to recycle if you can.
So, Ken, you guys set up a way to honor your volunteers. Tell us about that.
A way to honor our volunteers?
Yeah, you have, like, bicycles from Subaru.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, we're having giveaways. Subaru's given us, I think, 6 bicycles that are branded to give away. We've got, as Allyson mentioned, products from Black Diamond, and we also have various other prizes from well-known industry sponsors. And we'll be doing those giveaways after people hashtag facelift act local with a picture, and they'll enter in these giveaways, and then we'll send them out to them after we do a drawing.
Oh, what are some of the evening programs?
We're going to start it off with a new Patagonia movie that Mikey Schaefer did that's called Stone Local. We're hoping it sounds like we may have Alex Honnold do a short thing. We're waiting to hear on that. We've got another movie that we're going to premiere from Dustin Moore, and multiple other programs as well, including Kate Rutherford, who's a Patagonia athlete.
Yeah, cool. Kate's actually going to be telling us about her nonprofit that she's affiliated with, the Farm to Crag nonprofit, so that should be interesting.
That does sound interesting. Can you guys maybe address that briefly here? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think we've been really lucky because in the outdoor industry, people have been pretty like-minded about wanting to be environmentally responsible. Mm-hmm. And the Farm to Crag movement, I think, addresses the idea of eating locally and reducing the chain of production and distribution for food. So a good way that we can be environmentally responsible is to consider eating local rather than purchasing food that was maybe grown in South America and then shipped to Asia to be packaged, to be shipped back to the United States to be sold. Instead of doing that, you can just go to, find a local farm that has the same product, and you minimize a lot of steps in that production chain.
Oh, tell me about the Mikey Schaefer film.
I haven't seen it yet, so I'm looking forward to seeing it. We just got the link the other day, and we're putting captions on it right now. All right.
Yeah, the Stone Local film is actually, it's about different communities local to Red River Gorge. There's also a community of climbers in Japan. And it gives a very interesting, local feel to the communities that grow up and have arisen around climbing. There's also a little bit of addressing the growth of popularity of climbing over the last I would say over the last decade or so, and how that's impacted these, local communities.
So, tonight on Climb Talk, the radio show, we've been talking with Ken Yager and his associate about not their new event. It's been running for 17 years. It's the Yosemite Facelift. But this year, it's the virtual Yosemite Facelift because of all that's going on in the world with, I'm not even going to say it, So this year, Ken Yager and his friends
and
associates, backed by powerhouse sponsors such as Subaru, Black Diamond, North Face, and others, have put together a virtual Yosemite facelift, which is going to be at local from September 22nd to September 27th. Now, why do you guys only run it that long?
Well, that's normally that's the time we would do it in Yosemite. We're doing our evening programs then. But if anybody wants to clean year-round, I will try to get them litter sticks or whatever they want to do. We want this to be a year-round event eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. I think usually the event coincides with National Public Lands Day in September, but absolutely people should be picking up litter all year round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've already participated in 2 of them myself in the last month.
That's great, Ken. What, yeah.
You got to move on.
Oh, Mike,
thank you guys.
So wonderful. Thank you so much for having us. And Chris, thanks so much for the opportunity.
The pleasure was all ours.
Thank you, Allyson.
Thank you for your work.
Hey, Mike, since Ken is with Max, Ken, is there any way you can hand your phone to Max?
I can. He was ready on his other phone, but let me find him real quick around the corner, I think.
Okay. Allyson, thank you so much for today.
I'll do a brief intro, Chris. Okay, audience.
Thank you, Mike.
Talking to Ken. Oh, my pleasure, Ken. Thank you for putting together Yosemite Facelift. And so, audience, tonight, our second segment of the hour is going to be with Matt Buschini and Andrew Peterson. They recently released their directorial debut, Peter and the Columns. Okay, you got me, guys. What's that name mean? What's it all about? Go ahead.
So it's just going to be Max tonight, and that's why I can call Andrew in if you like, Max.
Sure.
Okay, let me see if I can reach him.
He may be busy, but...
Well, maybe send him a text, but we'll chat for a little bit, and if he's available, I'll call him in.
Sounds good.
Max had a big day today because yesterday we launched his video that he spent the last year working on with Andrew, where he shoots. Well, you know what, Max? Go ahead and tell us what it's about.
Oh, sounds great. So yeah, been working on this film called Peter and the Columns, featuring Florine. I've been on it for about the past year and a half, and it's about Pete Hoffmeister. He's from Eugene, Oregon. And there is a local climbing crag there called the Columns, which he frequents. And basically he decided to measure the columns, and he wanted to climb the height of El Cap. So he figured out that if you climbed 64 laps of the columns, you'd be able to climb the nose of El Capitan. And so he was, getting pretty quick and decided that he wanted to try and challenge Florine. Florine, who's, one of the best speed climbers of all time.
He's on the nose 110 times. Yeah.
Did the nose 110 times. Had the record on El Cap for about 20, 25 years on and off. And so, it's about Hans going to the Columns to race Pete, but then, unfortunately, Hans had a really bad fall on El Cap on the nose on May 3rd, 2018. They're supposed to race in later May 2018. And, so Hans had basically made this big comeback and raced Pete a year later. But Pete also is dealing with some pretty terrible injuries himself and had a really bad brain injury and actually used the columns as a way to come back because it was the type of climbing he was doing. He knew he wouldn't hit his head, and it was safe. So
he got hit by a car, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, he was biking to school because he's a teacher at South Eugene High School, Eugene, Oregon. And he got hit by a car in 2014, and he's been dealing with these effects, basically these lingering effects that have been around since then for the past 2 years.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
But they end up competing, and they end up becoming friends. And you also were involved with you were videoing Jamie Otto, or Moy, excuse me, and she had known Jamie since almost over 10 years. So it's kind of cool seeing her. She was one of my editors, but she was the co-writer for Hans's memoir, right? Which is how, and Pete knew her, so he contacted her. She contacted Hans.
Yeah.
They all met.
Yeah, and as the movie says, like Jamie was interviewing Pete, excuse me. Jamie was interviewing Pete, and Pete told her about El Cap days, and she said basically sent Hans Florine to go race him. Yeah. So she kind of sent him on Pete, essentially. But it was like definitely something Pete had wanted to do. He was psyched. He kind of didn't believe that was a true thing. So it's a cool story about like this local climber going up against his hero and like becoming friends. And that's the really cool thing about the climbing world is like you can climb with, I guess, like the Michael Jordans or Tom Brady's of the climbing world and get to know them. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, audience, tonight on CLIMBTALK, the radio show, we're talking with director Max Buschini. He's talking about his directorial debut, his film, Peter and the Column. It's all about Hans Florine, who is willing to race up a crag against a random local. Now, Peter Hoffmeister is not a random local.
He's the best climber at the Columns.
Yeah, and he's the best climber in the Columns, and he's also a really good writer, well-claimed writer and author. He's written multiple books. Wow. Yeah, and he's an incredible climber and done a lot of stuff all over Oregon. He's amazing.
Your flick got released, I think, yesterday. So released, where can people see it? I want to see it.
So people can see it right now. It's on Vimeo, and so you can see it on Vimeo.com. And then also there are multiple magazine articles that basically are sharing the story. So you can see it through there, and then there's links on Instagram, on my Instagram. If you follow me, Max Buschini, on Instagram, you can find basically the link in my bio. And, you can go see it on grip.com or Climbing Magazine or Rock and Ice as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty amazing.
Nice. Cool.
Really getting the numbers up there. People are really enjoying it. We've gotten lots of good feedback from the story that I wrote yesterday on you, and you've gotten lots of feedback on the video, it sounds like.
Yeah, we're getting lots of all positive feedback so far. So it's been really amazing, and it just feels really great. Really great to hear all this feedback.
So, Max, you got to tell me, did Pete beat Hans?
Yes, Pete won. Spoiler alert.
It's true, and he knocked an hour off his fastest time, didn't he?
Yeah, he knocked an hour off his old fastest time, yeah.
And he beat Hans by 4 minutes or something like that, or 16 minutes? Or?
He beat Hans, if I'm remembering correctly. He beat Hans about like 20 minutes, 22.
That's pretty incredible. Hans is fast as the wind.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hans, I was pretty shocked, honestly, about how it all went down. And I'm sorry for spoiling the end, everyone.
So Matt, how did Hans handle losing?
Well, that's the thing I love about Hans is like he was really happy to see Pete like do so well at the Columns, and as far as I know, Hans, he's definitely been very competitive over the years, and it was just really amazing to see him just be so psyched for someone else, and like they really were able to create this amazing friendship. And now they actually have been talking about doing this at other local crags, doing El Cap days and going around the country, and they wanted to do it like all over the country, but of course because of COVID, that's not really going to happen at the moment. But yeah, it's just it's a really cool friendship.
Wow,
that's a good idea.
So there's a connection between Max and Hans. So Max lives in Hans' basement in Yosemite.
Yep.
And he kind of caretakes the house, and so they're in touch a bunch. And Max also used to climb at the Columns because he went to school in Eugene.
Yeah, I went to school at the University of Oregon in Eugene.
Yeah.
Cool. So this was your directorial debut, Max. What can we expect from Max for 2021?
Oh, man, 2021. Hopefully more climbing films, and hopefully they're about Yosemite and sharing the love of Yosemite. So,
well, actually, you're working on a film on me right now.
Yes, that is true. I
am. Hold on. Did I hear that correctly? Say that again, gents. I didn't hear that. What's that? Is he making a movie on you, Chris?
It's true. Yep, we've been filming. My mom came out and we shot in El Cap Meadow, and
Yeah.
And we've been doing like sunrises. We're also meeting with Matt Cornell, who's like the extraordinary climber. So there's all sorts of projects we're doing together, and Max has been shooting amazing free solo photos and doing video work, and despite COVID and some of the challenges with the park access, we're still able to get together, and we also climb together quite a bit as well. He free solos every morning. Max is like hot, smoky days. He doesn't matter. He'll be free soloing in Yosemite to start the day. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you say smoky day, you're talking about the air, right? The
air is horrendous, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the air's bad in California right now, I hear.
We're at hazardous levels, like over 500 AQI today here in Mariposa, where I'm at, and Max is in Yosemite West, which is equally bad.
Actually,
so.
I mean, now at the moment I'm in Mariposa too.
Oh, you have the Yosemite climbing building, Yeah.
It's pretty bad, but yeah, I mean, I guess going on, I can talk a little bit about like that free soloing thing you're saying. That's you know, it's really easy when you live in Yosemite to just go out in the morning and do some solos of your favorite easy routes, and it's been really fun to take photos of Matt Cornell doing these incredible free solos. And he's been doing it for a long time, and just like in these beautiful places, it's really fun to capture someone like him doing that, and he's just an incredible person. So that's been also incredibly fun as well.
Yeah. From my perspective, me being in Boulder, it seems like the Californians are more concerned or interested or fascinated with soloing. Soloing around here, I don't know, hit the ground, but around here, I don't really hear that much people talking about soloing or showcasing soloing. Or why do you guys obsess on soloing? Why don't I bring it up because it's so dangerous? So for me, I have to downplay it because I can't really showcase it or glorify it on college radio because it's so dangerous.
Right. True. I don't solo anymore, for example. Very easy things that I've done a million times, but pretty much it's not my thing, not my game. It used to be.
Yeah. It's funny because I don't even really consider myself a soloist. It's more like there's these routes I've done a million times that are so easy, and if I don't have a partner, I just want to get a bunch of mileage in. It's just really easy to do so.
No, I understand.
Yeah, and that's mainly, I never look to go, I'm like, I want to go free solo something. I want to work up to free soloing that. It's more, getting grounded.
I understand. Cool. So, Chris, who did we have on the show tonight?
Oh, tonight was a really exciting show. We had Ken Yager from the Yosemite Climbing Association and the founder of the Yosemite Faceless. We also had his board member, Allyson Gunsallas. Allyson has been working with the Yosemite Faceless for a few years now. She presents on stage. She puts all the things together. They're a great team over there. There's also they have other members of the board.
They do sound like a great team.
And we also have Max Buschini, who does a lot of the filming with YCA and to promote the projects around there. And Max just had his directorial debut of Peter in the Columns that launched yesterday on grip.com and is now on Rock and Ice and Climbing and other outlets on the way. So really a treat to have Max today, who is one of Yosemite's local filmmakers.
That's cool. So, Max, what were the other names that you were going to use besides Peter and the Columns?
The other names the one other name we were thinking of was boring as a swear word, because that is Peter's slogan, essentially. Growing up, he said his mom said he can never be bored. It's the same thing as saying a swear word.
Oh.
Yeah. So that was another idea for the film name, but Peter in the Columns felt a little more fitting because basically we kind of thought, it's like, when we were thinking about like a musical artist, or at least this is mostly Andrew's thought, actually. He was the one who really came up with Peter in the Columns, so I'll give the credit to him. Basically, it's like a band. You have like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers or something. But then during a certain song, you may have someone feature on it, and usually that feature is a really famous person, and you want to have a feature on it to get noticed a little bit more. And so the feature is Hans Florine, and so he's like, you know, a very famous feature. So it's Peter and the Calm's feet, Hans Florine, like you would see like on iTunes or Spotify or something.
Got it. So, you know, Hans took a bad spill a couple of years ago, back in May 2018. So tell us about his recovery.
Yeah, his recovery I got to see a lot of it, unfortunately and unfortunately, and I was filming during that as well. Yeah, it was a really tough thing to watch. He had surgery on his heel, and it was really bad. And yeah, so it was a long process, but he was pretty set on climbing El Cap about 6 months after his accident, and it was actually kind of incredible to watch him and film him basically train and get back to being able to climb El Cap. And I actually filmed him climbing El Cap on November 12th. 2018, which is a significant date because that was the 60th anniversary of when Warren Harding, Wayne Mary, and George Whitmore first topped down the first Send the Nose.
Wow.
And so it was the 60th anniversary, and that footage is actually in Peter and the Columns.
Very
cool. That's a good idea.
Yeah,
that's cool. So Max Buschini, thank you so much for your work, and thank you for talking with us on Climb Talk, the radio show on Radio 1190.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Max.
Yeah, all right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Max.
Thank you so much.
Let's talk about right now, because he's working at the Yosemite Climbing Association. He's the artist in residence. So, Dean, I see you there a lot, working in a print shop. What are you doing back there?
Doing a lot of stuff to get this museum ready to be open to the public. So I've got here last December, haven't really left very much, was here during the COVID lockdown that started in March, and continuing to be here to basically do a little bit of everything, from working on the display cases that have the old pitons, artifacts, the old photographs, to working on the walls, to actually printing the photographs from my collection, from and obviously the books I've done over the years, and then actually printing them, matting them, working on the frames, framing them, putting things up, and it's kind of my passion for the moment. It's definitely a way of giving back to the community, but it's also, for me, it's also a way of me satisfying kind of this desire for perfection. And when I say perfection, what I mean is, for me, perfection is when you walk outside and it's not too hot and it's not too cold. It's just the perfect degree, or a soup that doesn't need any more spice or doesn't need to be any hotter. It's just enough. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. Is we're not trying to overplay something. We're not trying to underplay something. What we're doing here at this museum is showing you the history of climbing, the culture of climbing, and the art of climbing all at once, and trying to make that very seamless. And hopefully that will lead to the perfection that I'm seeking to help educate people, but also for my own personal way I do and make art. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. Seems like a lot, but it's not much more than an artist in residence should be able to do. You should be able to cut your own maps, make your own prints. You should be able to frame things. You should be able to vacuum the floor, help build the display cases, help make the displays. You should be able to do all that.
Yeah.
Bit of a handyman, bit of a something else.
You're doing a certain theme with everything. You told me this when I was at Alchemist. You said artist makes art. If you're not making photos, then you're collecting art. That's your purpose, I suppose. My decision in 2000 was to bring art into the climbing community. And here you are today doing that more than ever, it seems like.
And you always think that, oh, well, I'll collect these photographs, I'll make this book, and there'll be an exhibition. But you never think that you're going to have to actually collect all these photographs to actually make this book, then actually make the prints, cut the mats, find the wall space to put it on there, paint the walls, make the frames, put everything in order, make the captions on the nice gator foam and cut everything out and sand off the edges. All that stuff, it's kind of like a little bit, like I say, of being a craftsman, and a lot of it is being an artist, but also a collector, and a bunch of different things in order to bring that art actually into the community. So it's not what I thought in the very beginning, where it's simply you collect and you publish. It's way more than that, especially if you want the exhibition and the work to have that authentic feel that was the reason for me actually doing this stuff to begin with.
Well, what you've done on those walls is you've turned each panel into a period of time with as few items on display at an angle that captivates the eye. Either it's a bolt used on the first and center half dome, or it's a piton used on the first and center El Cap, and each area display tells a story, and you're presenting it in a way that the reader can take that space in.
Yeah, very much so. I want people to interpret what they're seeing in a number of different ways, and that goes right down to the actual displays. A lot of people might put the pitons right down onto the actual tabletop itself. But what we do is we raise the things up so you can see a few different angles on these things. They're almost like pieces of well, they are to us now. They're a touchstone in reality. They're bits of iron and steel that tell a story with every scratch, and with every bit of rust showing their age. And we want you to be able to actually, almost feel that with your hands through your eyes. And then the photographs above are the original photographs in a lot of cases, or the reproductions that I've made, by scanning the original negatives or slides or transparency, so you can actually see what happened on those days and how they used those tools. And also the story of all the very early ascents, right up to even now, are done by innovators. Those are the people that make the actual tools to enable you to do the climbs. And so that's how the artifacts relate to direct things on the walls. Very, very simple way. And you actually, the photographs themselves, if you want to read them as bits of history, you can. But if you really just want to open up their art, they transcend the experience and the time. Very, very much so.
It reminds me of something that I wrote about you in Adventure Sports Journal, when you said about Stonemeads. It's an organic process that includes only the basics: light, location, model, and spot and negative. I feel like you kind of bring that to the museum as well. You distill it to what's important, and you bring that out.
I think for me as a climber and an artist, and I think for a lot of climbers, climbing the imagery that you want, or that you try to get, or that really encapsulates the experience. It's everything from the actual climbing photograph to a landscape to a portrait. And that's kind of what I'm trying to show you here. I show you the climbs that the people have done. I show you how they lived on that climb, and then I show you a little bit more intimate image of them as a portrait made by a friend. So it's almost as if the camera wasn't there. And a lot of these images, of course, over the years have become iconic, but more than the story behind the image itself is just to be able to contemplate individual images and really transport yourself into that period of time.
Well, you do that. I mean, you spent years of your life, you do things like drive 100 miles to Jerry Dollison's home to look through his photos and to look at the ones that he liked and the ones he didn't like. To find the thin film or the negatives that are in poor shape that you can resurrect. And more so, you're connecting with a person, the period, and a place and time, which is what you've been looking at since you started climbing. You're being a part of the 70s era, so you see things from the 50s.
And very much so. I mean, I was inspired by the work from the 50s on to the 60s. A lot of stuff in the 60s with Glenn Denny and Tom Frost, both of whom became my mentors later on in life. But early on, I was obviously inspired by their black and white work, which was a combination of everything from landscape to pure climbing to portraits to what we would call nowadays lifestyle, but I would just call it life. Mm-hmm. And so those were my early inspirations, and that's kind of what I saw and worked toward. And once again, my period of time when I became a Stonemaster was working with those guys. We had this way of looking at life and this way of looking at climbing where we wanted to be that next generation. We wanted to pre-climb things. We felt brash. We felt more connected with rock and roll. And it was...
I got to jump in. Can I disturb you? Can I disturb what you're saying? You know, I like it
please,
all.
go right ahead, Mike.
I love it. So, audience, tonight we're talking with artist, photographer, Dean Fidelman, here in Climb Talk, the radio show. That was Chris Van Leuven as well. Dean, you mentioned the Stonemasters. You said when you became a Stonemaster. Tell us about that moment.
Okay, well, it was the original Stonemasters were a group of guys that climbed out at Talkies Rock, Suicide Rock especially, in the very early 70s. And in order to get into this club, you had to climb the hardest climb there. And the hardest climb had been put up by this guy named Bud Ivan Couch. And I think his other partner was Larry or Jim Reynolds. And they were kind of this earlier generation. We would have considered them old, even though they were probably in their late 20s or early 30s, but we were basically teenagers. And so John Long, Richard Harrison, Rick Accamazo, they went up there and they did this climb called Valhalla, which was the climb that these guys had put up. It was 511, and so they had done the second ascent, and then soon afterwards, Mike Graham and Tobin Sorensen did the third ascent, and then I probably ended up doing the fifth or sixth ascent with Tobin Sorensen and John Backer. And so if you did one of the first 10 ascents, not including the first, but the second through the 10th, you were basically considered a Stonemaster in that particular club, which then branched out, obviously, over the years when we all went up to Yosemite. But there was an original, I think, 12 Stonemasters that had done that since.
Dean, who made that rule? It's only 10. It's the second 10. It's the second. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it was kind of just like just something that we would hand down to each other. I don't know. I think maybe it could have been John Long came up with the rule, or it could have been Richard Harrison or something. We wanted to have a certain exclusivity, but really at the same time there was other guys there that probably hadn't done it very early on, but it didn't matter at a certain point. But very early on, there wasn't many of us, so it was kind of like you were always going to, even the new guy in the group, when I came in, I was still doing it with Tobin, who had already done the climb, right? So he kind of invited me into this group, and then the group, respected you because of your abilities and that you were their age. We were all literally the same age. Tobin was born in 1955. I was born in 1955. Ricky Accamazo was born in 55. Richard Harrison was more. We were all born within a couple of years of each other, so we were all going to like each other in a sense, and there wasn't enough of us anyway. So, you're trying to make a statement, and we were probably used to growing up with little gangs of friends, and this was this other little gang, if you want to call it that.
So that's something I wanted to bring in here, Mike, really fast.
Go ahead.
And you'll say this is pretty wild, Mike. I'm not sure if you like this, but there is a film that came out recently by Coulter Johnson. It's called the story on Fidelman, and it's called The Rapture of Soloing on Acid, and it's about stories from that period. Are you comfortable with that topic?
Go ahead.
Do you want to chime in there, Dean, and talk about that film a little bit?
Well, that's kind of the anti-climbing film, and really it's simply about just in the 70s, a group of people that, some of the original Stonemasters and some other people that were at that time that were part of the extended family, would we were all into Carlos Castaneda. You have to remember this. Really loved the Gate of Power and that whole era. And Separate Reality and Gate of Power and all kinds of stuff like that. And we were a very curious generation, obviously, early 70s by this time it would have been the mid to late 70s. And so a lot of us would probably take these psychedelics and go out and go soloing because we had already at that point in our climbing established our own solo, circuits. Yager doing very difficult things, and I would probably go easy 5'10".
Okay. Oh, you'd be soloing 5'10"?
I'd be soloing 5'10". Mostly, I was comfortable on 5'8" and 5'9". Stuff that I'd done a million times. That it was simply more expedient for the experience to go out and solo it, and so your psychedelics were involved in that sort of experience, but we kind of felt like we were kind of ninjas and shamans and everything wrapped up. We were kind of really into that thing, and that's how we were expressing ourselves. And if you looked at it, we were quite fit and we were very good climbers. And so by today's standards, what we were doing beyond backer wouldn't have been considered that difficult as far as the actual climbing. But
a couple of things you touched on right there, but you told me in a men's journal story where I wrote that you describe yourself and your friends as these kind of wild animals, and you're kind of less refined to societal sense, less domesticated, quick to react, politically passionate. Were those accurate words that describe the scene that you were?
Yeah, I think so. And the thing was, part of it was we, especially in the 70s, didn't want to be associated with hippies. Part of that reason was, and still is to some certain extent.
Why?
Well, what happened was, especially in Yosemite, in 1970, I believe it was, summer after Summer of Love, a bunch of hippies from the city started gathering in Yosemite Valley in this area called Stoneman Meadow, which is directly across from Curry Village. And this would have been in July or August of 1970. And so there was a bunch of them, and they just got into this meadow, and they started camping in this meadow. And the NPS at this point in time was more of a family-oriented kind of a thing. Yosemite was for families, and they didn't really know what to do with these people. The rangers were very conservative, and the people in charge of them were very pro-law enforcement. So there was enough hippies out there that the rangers decided that they had to go. And so they went out there with bullhorns, and they said, hey, everybody's got to go. And the hippies were, they were from the Bay Area. They were from Los Angeles. They were people that had been in the anti-war movement a year before. So they said no. And so the rangers said, oh, really? Now, this is later in the afternoon, mind you. So the rangers all they had horses. So they decided to do a picket charge. So they threw tear gas at the hippies, and they started coming at them with horses. Well, the hippies, they knew what to do with tear gas. You take your bandana, put it over your mouth, take another bandana, grab tear gas canister, and throw it back at the people. Not only so they started throwing it back, but also they knew how to deal with rangers on horses. All you got to do is get up to them and pull them off the horse. They also knew how to pick up big rocks and throw them at the rangers. So the rangers basically, and the wind changed and started blowing all the tear gas back into the rangers' faces. So it was pretty much a rout. The hippies won.
Well, wasn't Rangers' cars were pushed over, maybe the Hells Angels?
Oh, yeah, the hippies, So then the Rangers retreat to their cars, and they're stuffed into the cars, and the hippies are advancing on them, throwing rocks. They overturned a couple of Ranger cars. They put a big bonfire in the middle of the road. And this went on for days. The Rangers would come in, get stoned by actual stones, go running away. And so they called in the National Guard. Nixon, the president at the time, he was convinced that the hippies were going to take over the national parks. So they called in the National Guard. National Guard did their picket charge, put everybody in buses, took them all out of there, processed them down in probably, Fresno or wherever, Merced, and let them go. And then after that, Nixon began...
Let them go.
Yeah, basically let them they were always letting them go. I mean, it would be a small fine. Yeah. So they really weren't doing anything wrong. And so after that, the Park Service here in the United States, and to this day, systemically began to look at hippies or, marginalized, and that included climbers. Anything that was, their head was kind of like if you were a nail and your head's above the board, they're going to hammer it flat. They have the mentality of move you along, It's kind of this, it's still a windscreen park. It's still for middle-class families. And the climbing culture itself, you need to be there longer. Yeah. And in order to do that, you have to go down low, and you have to, sleep in the meadow. There's lots of ways to evade, less and less, of course, every year. But that does date back to that summer, after the Summer of Love in 1970, as to law enforcement's attitude toward climbers until perhaps just recently.
And a lot of that relationship is shifted due to the annual facelift, where the rangers work kind of side by side with the climbers, who work side by side with the concession workers, who work side by side with guests. So in a way,
that's part of it. Ken Yager's done a really good job with that, and as an outreach. But there's also, there are currently rangers now that were climbers from the community, still are, in fact, obviously climbing rangers, that probably are more understanding of what's going on. At the same point, if you want to be low-hanging fruit, you'll be picked. If you want to work a little bit, and I love how if you want to work a bit and build your soul up a little bit here, then you can evade and still have an amazing time, probably a more amazing time by simply leaving less of a trace of yourself, I should say.
So speaking of which, you haven't left much of a trace in your own life over the years. I mean, you're a minimalist yourself. You use hardly anything, belongings that you have, other than, I think, the largest collection of Yosemite climbing photos of anyone in the world. But you've worked as a handyman, a dishwasher, a carpet cleaner, and also the author of 5 books. So you've done what it takes to live this lifestyle among these climbers, because you're friends with the sports best over the years, and you consider your best friend to be the late Dean Potter. So those relationships come from just time, right? Time and experiences and sharing important moments with them, right?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, my relationship, especially with Dean, but with a lot of really big climbers, part of it was, being with the Stonemasters back then, my friendship with Lynn Hill over the years, she, opened a lot of doors for me moving forward. But when it came to the Stone Monkeys, which they got together in the late 90s, it was, what had happened was I had stopped making climbing photographs for probably about a decade or less. And in that period, trying to, do fashion and some editorial work. But anyway, when I came back into it, a lot of my friends from the 70s, Charles Cole, John Backer, Mike Graham, owned companies like Vermici Products, Mike Graham, Charles Cole would have owned 510, John Backer at the time owned L'Oreal. And I said, hey, man, I just want to make these climbing photos. I don't really like making these fashion photos or whatever. And they go, oh, well, hey, why don't you make a photo of our one of the people we're sponsoring? Because, these guys now have companies. And so I'd be working for Charles Cole, be working for Backer, be working a bit for the climbing magazines, because they kind of knew who I was from the 70s, even though they hadn't really bought the work at the time. They knew the work existed. So that kind of opened doors. And then, it turns out a lot of the people, they knew kind of who I was, strangely and oddly. It's always weird. But anyway, but the thing was, here I was back in Yosemite, and this was going to be my life. And here's the deal for me. It's like, there's going to be times in your life where you're depressed. Things are not going well. There's going to be times in your life when things are going great. There's going to be a time in your life when you're feeling bad and you get in your car and you drive someplace and you end up feeling great. and people don't understand, but that's your life.
Yeah.
You know, so when I started to make these photos again of climbers in Yosemite, yeah, it was through these connections, but it was also like, I'm going to sit here. I'm going to be here. I'm going to live in that meadow or down by the river, and we're going to hang out. We're going to break bread. Neither of us has much money. We're going to have these adventures. We're going to be friends, and I'm going to make these photos. The photos are a byproduct of our friendship. But every moment, whether it's good or bad or fantastic or horrible, is that moment in your life that you better live it fully and understand you're not waiting for something to happen. You're making it happen by living.
That's a good way of putting that, Dean. So tonight on Climb Talk, the radio show on Radio 1190, we're talking with artist and photographer Dean Fidelman. Dean, again, thank you for joining us on Climb Talk, the radio show.
Well, thanks a lot, Mike. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Mike, are we still going here with time, or do you want to?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I have a dozen questions, and I'm trying to wait for the time to ask Dean, like about Bill Dolt.
Okay.
Florine. Did you meet that guy?
I never met a Dolt. I actually saw some of his photos early in my climbing career, and some of the really early nose stuff. You would see it now and again in magazines. But actually now, speaking of Dolt, I probably have the biggest collection of his photographs currently known. It took me about, 3 or 4 years to actually piece all his stuff together. He committed suicide in the early...
So, Dean, why did Bill Dolt commit suicide?
I think there was a number of reasons. First off, he was working as an engineer for a while at, I think it was McDonnell Douglas, working probably, making parts for airplanes and doing testing and that sort of thing. And he didn't really like that. Then he started making his own gear, which would have been pitons, all kinds of pins. But if you really look at the gear, and we have a bunch of it here at the museum, it's like pieces of jewelry. It's almost as if it was never meant to be used. The styling on each piton is a little bit different. They're all really beautifully styled. They're all like chrome moly. They're all, highly polished. And some of the cutouts on the bongs, which are the bigger pitons,
wow.
Cutouts. They're like little hearts.
Bongs?
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
You have Dolt bongs at the Yosemite Climbing Museum?
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. We have a really good selection of his gear. And
it's so beautiful in there. There's in the state of it now, there's so many cool pitons sitting on the counters, and you can see where each hammer strike went to make it, and there's really cool stuff in there.
Yeah, there's fantastic. We have this when Roy Robbins was soloing the second ascent of the Muir Wall, rope soloing it. He fell on a rope really high up, and it blew, and he took this big horrendous fall, and he was able to shake it off and go back up again. We have that rope. It was a handmade hatchet thing, but we have the stuff from Dolt. I think he was an artist. I think that he didn't really have a way to express exactly who he was as an artist through climbing. That's why he was making these pins. I think he should have been more like like a gallery kind of artist is what he would have been happy with as a sculptor or something like along those lines. But as it was, he at the time in the 50s, it was kind of aggressively, you're supposed to be aggressively normal in a way, and you had this career path and this family path and this life path kind of laid out in front of you. And if you didn't tick the boxes and get the right things at the right time, you might have felt that life had left you behind. And that's, in the end, that's kind of what Dolt felt like. He felt like his best times were behind him instead of all around him. So.
Oh, wow, that's a good way of putting that.
In a way.
Yeah, so tonight on Climb Talk, the radio show, we're talking with artist, photographer, Dean Fidelman. Dean, Mark Powell started Camp 4 Lifestyle.
Yes, he did.
Do you think that's true?
Oh, very much so. Here, the wonderful thing about Mark Powell is when I first started climbing, it would have been very early 70s, 72, 73, 71. I met a friend of mine. His name was Guy Kesey, and he was Guy was probably about 5 or 6 years older than me. He was in college. He went to junior college in the San Fernando Valley, and one of his teachers was, in fact, Mark Powell. Mark was he taught geology on the college level and junior college level, and my friend Guy was one of his students, and he mentioned that he was a climber, and Mark mentioned, of course, he was a climber. And then I met Mark, and we went climbing a few times early on, and he always told me then that, I started the Camp 4 bum. And so when I was making this book, it's called Yosemite in the 50s, the Iron Age.
Mark
did a lot
Powell
of research.
said that?
Yeah. And he said he wanted to be remembered as the one who started the Camp 4 bum. And so what he used to do was, he lived in Fresno, and he was a little bit overweight when he started climbing. And so what he used to do is he would ride a bicycle from Fresno to Yosemite and probably had like 10 or 15 bucks on him. And he could live in Camp 4 all year round, pretty much. During the winter, in the spring months, he'd be in Fresno. He would be a fruit picker, so he'd get itinerant work, and he rode his bicycle everywhere. And I have these photos of him early on.
What do you think drove, Gene, what do you think drove Mark Powell to live such an extreme lifestyle?
It was the passion of climbing, but it was also early on, a partner had looked at him and said, you're kind of pudgy, you don't have a lot of coordination, I don't think you should climb. And he actually took that as a bit of obviously an insult, but he also took it as a challenge. And he loved life that way. But if you see photos of him, very early photos like we have at the museum, every bit of clothes he's wearing, he used to climb in Converse All-Star tennis shoes that are shredded. And all his clothes, you can see it's been shredded and sewn together and shredded again. And this is back when Army surplus in the early 50s was nothing for a pair of pants. So, he went through this stuff, but he didn't have any money. All his money was spent on whatever little food he'd have, so he could last it out in Yosemite, and he can continue climbing. He had that passion, and that's what it was about. But he also understood that he could live that way, and in order to live the best life, you got to give up something, someone else's best life.
That's true.
And it's that's your sacrifice. Is this? You're going to have shoes that are blown apart, and occasionally you can get some new shoes, and it doesn't matter. They work good enough. It's like.
It reminds me of something that you told me over the years, is that you're a photographer. You view your photos as music, the cameras as instruments, but then you also haven't owned a camera. So in a way, you sample these different instruments. And so I know Renan gifted you his camera recently, but for all these years, you were the one as well, simply existing among people.
Right.
Yeah,
very much so. I always was able to. I also, I really love photographers, and I hang out with a bunch of photographers when I can. And throughout my career, I've hung out with different photographers and worked with them simply to learn what it is they do, and see a little bit through their eyes. But and so the camera thing came up with. People would always have another camera someplace that they didn't use that was a good professional camera, and I asked if I could borrow it, and I would usually borrow it for a few years.
Like Charles Cole's medium format camera,
yeah,
right?
Charles Cole medium format camera. He gave me this camera. I said, hey, I want to make these photos of these women climbing naked. I'm tired of selling shoes. He goes, yeah, that's a great idea. And I go, well,
is that what he said?
Yeah. And I go, well, I want to use your camera, your medium format camera. You had a really nice Pentax 6x7 with all these lenses. He goes, oh, you want to borrow my camera? I go, yeah, I want to borrow your camera. He goes, you're going to make some photos for me now and then, of my shoes or whatever. I go, yeah. He goes, all right, here's the deal. He goes, yeah, you can borrow the camera. But he goes, you got to got to give it back to me within 24 hours of me asking for it. I go, all right. So I borrow the camera. I make this first calendar, and actually he loaned me some money to get the first calendar, the production done on it as well. And about a year from when I borrowed the camera, I got a phone call. He says, I need the camera tomorrow. All right. I was in Northern California, Yosemite or something. I got in my car, drove down there. Next morning I show up, walk in with the camera. I go, hey, Charles. He goes, hey, what's up? I go, well, I got your camera. He goes, I don't know, man. Put that thing back in your car. I just want to have lunch. I'm buying. And he did that pretty much every year for about 20 years. Mm-hmm. I want that camera. And I bring it back to him. He goes, I don't want the camera. I want to have lunch. He goes, you ever going to give me that money back? I go, nah. He goes, cool. You know, you need some money? Yeah. Or he talk about a photo he wants to make, and I make it.
I had a question about a photo. Is it you that took this photo of Sharma eating out of the can?
Yeah.
Yeah, so tell me about that photo. Is that
so, like, I meet Chris. I was, like, with Lynn, hanging with Lynn Hill, making photos of Lynn, following her around on a trip through Europe. I ran into Chris Sharma and Tommy Caldwell, and they were, like, 15, 16 years old, and they were kind of competing, and Chris was working with Jim Thornburg a lot, but Jim had a conflict with his schedule, had to leave Europe. Anyway, so somehow I hook up with these guys. So we're driving, and we're in France, in Fontainebleau, where we got this real cheap hotel right by the train station. And 4:30 in the morning, Chris is banging on my door. Get up. I'm like, huh? Get up. We're going Boulder. And I go, what the fuck? It's like 4:30 in the morning. So I get up and get some coffee. I'm sorry, I don't like about the swearing. But anyway, I get some coffee and we get into the car. We get out there and it's like, it's not even light, And I go, why you guys? He goes, well, the friction's better now. It's damp, right? Friction's better. I understood. They're 16. This is it, man. This is like the passion. Get there at the best temperatures. They can't wait for the light to come up before they get there. They got to get there.
They can't slow down for that.
No, it's just who they are. It's why they are, what they're waking up for. And so, there was basically no food besides coffee at that time in the morning. So we had the coffee, and then I look over, and there's Chris. He's eating out of a can of peaches, and he didn't think about bringing any utensils beyond, like, probably the knife that he used to open it.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a rock or something.
Yeah, so he bent the top over, and he was scooping the peaches out, and occasionally one would fall out into the ground, and he'd leave that. And he's just eating these peaches, so I just turned around, and I was like, this kind of sums up everything that's going on right now. I would die right now for a croissant, cafe au lait petit, and just like, okay, maybe, but no. Here we are. So I made the photo, and people really it kind of resonated, because really that's exactly who he was in that particular moment. He was just psyched. And so was Tommy. They were just psyched to be doing this, and being sponsored really meant less than anything. It meant like a ticket to get someplace back then, and then everybody was kind of on their own. So it was really fun.
And you remain friends with them. I mean, they're the nicest people I know, but they're part of you're connected with Jimmy Chin and Sharma and Tommy. And so you recently did this Kickstarter for the YCA, and by tapping into these people, Jeter Wright, maybe even me in some ways, because I did some stories, but you made $35,000 for the museum.
Yeah, we got we were looking for 21, we got 35, 5, something like that, 36, and so we were really psyched. We're still psyched about that. We still are trying to get things moving forward with the museum to get it open, but that really helped take some of the pressure off, because COVID hit us right when I wanted to open this place. So that helps, and not only it helps that you can see sort of the depth in the community, people who really support this and really want to be a part of this, and everything from their pledges to getting the word out there, and we're offering different photographs, prints, and for different donations. But yeah,
amazing photographs. You have like the Bridwell and John Long and.
Yeah, the nose in the day photo.
Yeah, that one. And who was the third in that photo? Did you know that one?
Yeah, Billy Westbay.
Billy Westbay, right? And then there was the.
Gene, that's your photo.
No, that's actually Mike White, is the photographer for that, a.k.a. Whitey, Mike White. And the thing here is the story of finding that photo. I was making the Stonemaster book. I was over at Bridwell's house, because I knew Bridwell had that photograph, that transparency slide. So I'm hanging out there, and I'm, hey Jim, I want to see. Do you have that the nose in a day photo? He goes, yeah, I think so. I go, well, can I scan it? He goes, well, what do you got for me? I go, all right. I don't know. How about $25? And I got some weed. Give you some weed. Okay. That's good. So he goes in the closet and he's got all these boxes of slides. He's looking around. I don't know where it is. He goes, but I got this one and I got that one. I got this thing and I got that thing. And I go, okay, well, I'd scan this and that and the other thing. And I go, well, you keep looking. He goes, I'm looking. He's got hundreds of slides. He's looking. We're getting high. I'm there for, I don't know, almost like a couple days. It's like getting late. I'm like, Jim, I'm going to sleep here. He goes, all right, sleep here. And we could just watch TV all night or what have you. And then, so the next day I'm like, where's that slide? The one with you guys. I want to scan that for the book. And he's like, I don't know. I go, I paid you for that. He goes, you paid me for everything. I go, all right, whatever. So he goes, don't worry, I'll keep looking. I go, well, I got to get up to Yosemite. I got to make some photos, or there was something going on in the valley. I got to get up to the valley. All right. I'll let you know when I get it. I go, you let me know, Jim. I get in the car, I'm driving, and it's like, I'm going to be driving 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, whatever. I drive slow. I'm about 2 hours into my drive. The phone rings. I look down. I can see it's him. I was very, very irritated. I just turned the car around before I picked up the phone. I turned the car around, pick up the phone. He's like, I go, yeah, I know, I'm on the way. But
that's funny.
It was always fun working with Jim. And he also told me at the beginning of the book, he goes, are you making a book? I go, yeah, I'm making this book about the Stonemasters. He goes, what do you have to say about climbing? What do you, Dean Fidelman, have to say about climbing?
Said that to you.
Yeah, and I go, I think I have a lot to say about climbing. And he just looked at me, didn't say anything. I'd known him forever, like my dad. So when the book came out, a couple years later, 3 years later, whatever, he looked at it, pulled me aside, and he goes, you know that thing I said about you and climbing, having something to say? I go, yeah. And he goes, yeah, this says it. Good job. I was kind of happy about that.
But I interviewed you when he was passing. He was like a father figure to you.
Very much so.
And you guys met in 71 or 72. You were 16.
Yeah.
And there was a day when you went out and you were climbing together, and you met him, and I think you gave him all your pot. But then I think you were on the right side of the folly.
Yeah.
And you were kind of not sending, and he's like, he told you, the thing is, life and friends, it's about the person. I don't care how hard someone climbs. I care about how they are as a person.
Yeah. That was the one thing I always moved forward with in my life. Because at that time, I was just like young Stonemaster, blah, blah, blah. And, I wasn't as good as those guys. I was, good enough. But those guys were all great, They were brilliant. I was like, I guess, a good photographer or something. But, so you don't really know your place, and here's this this legend. He's climbing with you, and I'm like having a horrible time leading this pitch. It's wet, and I'm falling. And he goes, "Hey, come on down here. It's just like let's have a smoke. We're having a smoke." And he goes, "We're just talking about all things, And he goes, because I don't really care about who's a really great climber, or how hard they climb, or something. I care about what's inside the guy, what's inside the person." What makes a friend, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, yeah, I think I know what you mean. Will you lead this bitch? He goes, yeah. but I took that, and I would go places with Jim, and Jim is kind of like John Long. John Long can talk to anyone. And I've always envied that. Anyone, anywhere. You go to a bar, you can talk to, like, you know, the burliest guy in there, or, you know, whoever, anywhere in between.
Yeah.
And Jim was like that. He always had something to say to someone that can engage someone on a whatever level that needed to be to actually have a connection or a conversation that meant something. And so I learned that from those guys. Billy Westbay was kind of the same way, and all these guys sort of had this code and this way of living their life that appealed to me. And so when you're brought into that group and when you're mentored by those people, it's made a lasting impression. A lot of things you have to de-learn over the years, and you learn different ways of doing things. But as far as even back then in the 70s, you kind of made your own gear in a way, you know?
Yeah.
Like when we first got our gear, a lot of it was seconds that was in the Chenard factory's ironworks trash can. Yvonne will let us go in there without acknowledging that we were going in there. But anyway, and we would take these things, and then Backer had a drill press, and he'd come out and he had these drilled hexes before they were making the drilled hexes.
Oh, wow.
So, and the drilled hexes were more expensive anyway, so we were drilling our own.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they were tables would get nicked and such, but whatever. It was you were still innovating. There was still plenty of innovation to be had and done. You were innovating with your climbing style, with free climbing, hard, aid routes, with, your bouldering. There was a lot of innovation going on back then, and inventing and so on. So you were a part of that, or you knew someone who was making that gear personally, and you had these little pieces you might test out, or you just felt like you were a part of whatever evolution or revolution was going on in that moment. And I kind of felt the same way with the Stone Monkeys, in a sense that climbing had grown up to a point where there's this media that needed to be fed, and so when you have to feed a beast, sometimes it eats junk food and sometimes it eats nice things. And so I wanted to be maybe the person who was putting the nice things in there. And the people that I was working with, they kind of knew, that these images might be something they really would like to represent themselves, or, eventually put up in their own walls or what have you. And so, a lot of that, what? Go ahead.
I was going to say really quickly here, but these photos, because you're the collector, like I said, and producer as well, but you've done, these images show up in your 5 books. I just want to list them off really fast. There's the Stonemasters, California Rock Climbers in the 70s from 2009. There's Stone Nudes, Art in Motion, 2010. There's the Valley Climbers, Yosemite Vertical Evolution, 2012. And Yosemite in the 50s, the Iron Age, 2015. And then just this year, you have Stone Nudes Climbing Bear. And it seems like a lot of these tales see their way into these books that you're doing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And with all the books, even the 50s books, I make photographs of the pitons, super high-res images so you can see every scratch of the pin. Unlike white backgrounds, I also make, the landscapes that you put into the book. So it's, once again, for me, to make a book, I actually have to kind of make the book, And for some other artists, they just do their part and it moves along, because you're going to be part of a team with a book anyway, in a sense. But for me, I really enjoy making stuff, and so that's why a lot of my stuff finds its way in. But that's, the stories behind that. If you want something that's real, those are the kind of photographs you're going to find. And all the photographers make that stuff, from Jimmy Chin to Mikey Schaefer to Corey Rich to, Boone Speed, all those guys. They're friends with these guys. They're great climbers. They know what a great climb looks like and how it feels and how you need to see it, how they see it, and what's going on there. But they do have that connection. It's still very much alive. But this Yosemite Museum shows it in a way like that makes it so obvious. Like, you look at all this stuff and it could have all been made by Jimmy Chin yesterday, in a way. But in fact, it was made 50 years ago. You're like,
that detail and that knowledge of the as a sport.
Yes, exactly. Jimmy knows exactly what's going on. He's a part of the same adventure that whoever's on is photographing in his images. All these guys, Mikey Schaefer was definitely a really great climber and new router in Yosemite. He makes these photographs a lot of times on these routes he's put in, and they look amazing because of their amazing routes, but also he knows. Yeah. He knows what it feels like to be there, and he wants to share that experience with us.
So speaking of sharing, I have 2 points I wanted to bring up, but one is Stone Nudes, and the second is how you're passing the torch, because I think that connects to what we're talking about here. You knowing your subject, and then you're teaching them. Are you
passing the torch?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was supposed to happen this year, but I think it's happening. What's going on is there's a couple friends of mine that have actually been in the calendars before. They're really good artists and they're photographers, and 2 women, Alita French, and who's lives in Moab and is Andy Lewis's partner, and Katrina DaCosta from San Diego, who's a really great climber, boulderer, and photographer. And and myself, we were going to put together a new Stone Nudes calendar. Those guys have been, I've mentored them a bit. They're really excellent talents, and they've made their photos, and I've made mine. We were going to kickstart it this year, but we'll probably end up doing it next year. But I wanted to move it forward.
Okay. Gene, you made a point there. You said they had really good balance.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that? Tell the audience, what did you mean when you said they had good balance?
Good balance?
Yeah.
What I mean by that is, they have a certain way of seeing things that includes the entire image and the emotions behind it. That's what this balance is. So it's not only like a technical balance, but it's an emotional balance. When you're able to bring that to a photograph, that's when you end up with a very iconic or intuitive image that talks to a lot of people. And, and that's the kind of thing too, it's when you're working within climbing, it's all about balance.
Mm-hmm.
And, perfection is found in balance in climbing. If you do a climb and you're all in balance, it means you've looked great, but this means you felt great. And you've achieved probably what's known, I would consider, perfection, because the feeling was exactly what you wanted and the climb felt how you wanted it to feel. So when you're photographing it, that same sense of balance needs to come out. Mm-hmm. And so it comes from the understanding of what that boulder looked like to you, the entire boulder, what the movement within that boulder problem looks like, and how it all fits together. And that's the kind of balance you need. And so it becomes sort of an emotional balance and a technical balance of just actually being able to get the photograph with the right light, so on and so forth. And a lot of people have this. And these 2 women bring a lot to the plate that way, I think. So they're great artists. I actually think women should be making these photos, and there should be a lot more women climbing photographers. There is a number out there, but one of the next exhibitions we're going to do here at the museum is going to be a new Yosemite climber, and it's going to be women. So
fantastic.
When do you have a date on your next show?
I'm hoping it's before the end of this year. That's really what I'm looking at this point. We're looking at having this current exhibition hopefully available sometime in mid-October. That's the latest.
And how do people get involved? How would you be able to come in October? Do you have to pay in advance for a private showing? Is it open to the public?
Do you guys give private showings?
We do. We will do private showings for sure.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so at least we can get it out there, and also we want feedback from those who see it. See what they're seeing. We need to know that. It's part of this is all evolving, but it's also, without art you won't have culture, and climbing has a culture and it has an art. That's what we're trying to bring together, show people we have that. There is a culture here. And
beautiful things. I mean,
culture is a very soulful culture.
Yeah.
By
yeah.
every measure. So.
Yeah. A lot of bright, interesting, passionate people anyone can see are involved in this project. And what a fun project that you have, that you're working on, that you're creating, that you're offering. Mm-hmm. And again, tonight on CLIMBTALK, we're talking with artist photographer Dean Fidelman. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I was going to say, one thing is you're turning the Stone Nudes to color this year, correct?
Well, what's been going on is in 2018, when I decided to end the project, which was the 2019 calendar, I gifted my camera, one from Charles, to Katrina DaCosta.
Still working?
Yeah, still works. Works well. She's way into film. And at the same time, Renan Ozturk sent me a really nice Sony A7 Mark II-R. Okay. Really nice camera and a really nice lens. One lens. It was a 24 to 72.8 G. Very nice lens, very nice camera. And said, here, see what you can do. And I was like, oh, all right. And so my first few images were black and white. And I ran through the camera. And I was looking at that. And I realized that you're looking at a mirrorless camera. So you have an EV, electronic viewfinder. And I realized that you could put the viewfinder in black and white. Because what was happening with me is color was kind of weird. I don't perceive color all that well. And it was I was losing the light. So I put the EV to black and white, but I left the raw images into color. And I've been making photos that way, and then I turn them around, and they're quite beautiful. I was doing my vision backwards, is what I've been doing.
Yeah.
And I've also been using the camera in a way that I couldn't use a film camera. I made the decision. I go, if I'm going to make digital photographs, there has to be a reason. Beyond the fact that making film photographs is kind of like saddling a cow. You don't necessarily have to do that, and it's not going to be a great ride anyway. So I decided what I'm doing now is I'm kind of looking at, I do a lot of stitching. A lot of my photographs have 20 images in there where I'm stitching these images of the background and the foreground, and I'm doing things in the air. See, I've used a lot of stuff on rock people attach. I'm doing like silks and these lyras, which are these circles, and I'm doing kind of straight up beautiful color nudes in the landscape in Yosemite. A lot of the stuff is inspired by painters like Andrew White and others, Hopper. Just sort of I'm trying to go to this next level, I guess, in a way. I'm trying to continue to move forward. I'm still working within the climbing community with a lot of the people that I use for these photographs, but also working in almost the straight climbing community, I guess, in a way that's like this history of climbing, climbing photographers, and then I work in the more other reaches of climbing art, from stone nudes to this other stuff that's inspired by that and practiced by the same kind of people, so I can continue, pushing my own boundaries, I think, and giving back at the same time. It's that balance, the old and the new, and digital's really done that for me. So yeah, right now in the present, I'm psyched. I got to tell you.
I can tell when we hang out. You're busy. You're telling stories. You're full of things that you're passionate about.
Yeah, I love the stories.
Want me to tell you one about Potter?
Yeah, I do actually.
I want to hear all the stories, and so just start.
This is like one of the first times we worked together, Dean and I, and it would have been late 90s maybe. And he found me in Camp 4 once, one morning, probably in the cafeteria actually, and he's like, "Hey, want to make some photographs of a high line?"
Mm-hmm.
Sure, where's the high line? He goes, "Oh, I'm putting it in between lower and higher spire."
Wow.
And I said, "Okay, that sounds good, and it's got a great view of El Cap." I go, "Fantastic, El Capitan spires." He goes, "Sure." I go, "You need some help putting it in?" He goes, "Yeah, that would be great." You know, I had nothing to do, right? I was just going to go climb it or hang out or whatever. So we do this hike to the base of the lower spire, and there's the regular route there, and he's got it fixed with some ropes. And he gives me a mini traction. So I clip into the mini traction. And I would climb mini tractioning. I had a small pack on, and he'd have a bigger pack, and he'd be right in front of me. He'd just be soloing. He'd solo up, and he'd watch me mini track, and I get to this ledge, big ledge up there, about halfway up, that you can see the line going over to this big ledge on the higher spire, and it's about a 55, 60-foot gap. Beautiful. And we get there, we have lunch, you know, which is probably Ritz and like salami, you know, those salamis with the provolone cheese. You get the package of that. We have that. We have like maybe some fruit or something like that. And we'd look around there, and we'd be looking for anchors, and he'd put anchors in, and then he went down and we had the trailing rope, and he walked across, and he soloed up to the other side, and he pulled the trailing line up, and then he brought some anchor stuff over, and I sat there and watched the sun, you know, go and watch the sunset, you know, scrounge around, found some food, maybe smoked some dope, and he put the anchors in, and then he went down and came back over, and I rappelled, and he down climbed next to me. We walked into the forest and hung out that night, had some food, went to sleep early, got up the next morning, walked back up there and pulled the line and checked the anchors, and then put the tension on the line and put some tape on the line, put a leash on, walked across it, came back and said, "You know, what do you think about some photos?" And I go, "Yeah, we can make some photos." I go, "I think I need to be on the other side." And I go, and down a little bit. And there was a fixed rope going down from the anchor. So I went down and I walked over there, and it looked pretty good. El Cap was in the background. There he was. So he walked across with his leash, and I made some photographs, had a roll of film. I was going to use up the roll. And he came across, and I was using the roll, and he went back again to the other side. I put a new roll in there, and I just, you know, shot up a couple frames downward, and I said, he goes, "You ready?" "Oh, yeah. And I looked up, and he stepped on the line, and I started making photos. And he looked really a little bit awkward, like a little unsure, a little bit unsettled, and I couldn't figure out why. After all, he had a leash on. So I thought, I just continued focusing on him and getting our rhythm together. He made a step. He got into balance. I made the photograph. A few breaths. He made a few more steps. He was right there in front of me, and I was making photographs. He stopped for a moment. I made a photograph, and then he was about 3 feet, 4 feet from the end. He lunged to the end and jumped to the ledge. In that moment, I realized he didn't have the leash on.
Wow.
I go, "Oh, okay." He goes, "Yeah, I wanted the photos of the solo." I go, "Okay, yeah." He goes, "I didn't know." And he goes, "Oh." He goes, "That probably made it better, huh?" I was like, "Yeah, you know, there's not going to be any nervousness coming out of me regardless. I'd worked with soloists for many years. So the worst thing you can do is put your own insecurity on someone who's completely secure on the rock. You have to be as secure as they are. Do your job, take a photograph, interpret the moment." But anyway, so we had a laugh about that. I came back over. We decided we're going to pull the line the next day. We'll watch the sunset. Had the last of our food. I rappelled down. He down climbed next to me. We started going down the boulder field. He took his shoes off, was barefoot. It was getting toward dusk when we hit the trees. We were still a few hundred yards from the road. It was dark and gloomy in the trees, so he reached into his pack, and he had 2 headlamps, and he pulled them out. I said, "No, put them back." And he put them back in the pack. He looked at me strange, and we walked a little bit, and he stopped, and he goes, "How come no headlamp?" I go, well, because someday we're going to be in the dark. We need to find our way without the headlamp. Today's that day. He looked at me and smiled. We walked into the dark, found our way home. So
that's a good one. You know, I could end the show right there, gents.